Welcome to the Calm Analysts channel. Boris Tizengauzen is here with you. Today is September 4th. There's a lot of interesting news. In this episode, Putin invites Zelensky to Moscow. What is it? A desire to talk or a trap? And what's behind the conversation between Putin and Xi Jinping about extending life to 150 years? And how is this connected to Putin's daughter, who is in charge of genetics in Russia? Trump is playing Captain Obvious, shifting the focus and giving Putin even more time. Meanwhile, Russia is preparing to fully participate in the Olympics. Although, as it turns out, Russia only has enough oil left for 25 years. And suddenly, out of nowhere, Hungary and Slovakia are lobbying for Russian oligarchs. And I have an amazing story to tell you about how Russian generals become billionaires. There will be a lot of interesting things about this and more in today's episode. If this is your first time on this channel, subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And let's get started. Putin is so afraid of being alone with Zelensky somewhere on neutral ground that, for the second time after the parade in Beijing, he has invited Zelensky to Moscow. He said verbatim, "If Zelensky is ready, let him come to Moscow and such a meeting will take place." Well, to be honest, last time opinions were divided in the comments about whether Putin is ready to physically eliminate Volodymyr Zelensky or not. I'm not sure he would dare to go for physical elimination, but causing harm to his health or poisoning him would be much easier. Just like how Russian special services poisoned Ukrainian President Viktor Yushchenko with dioxin, so the goal would be for the person to slowly fade away. Just like how Alexander Litvinenko was poisoned with polonium, and also remember how the Skripals were poisoned in Salisbury. When it comes to the development of poisons and toxic substances, Russia has certainly made progress in this area, if in nothing else, because Putin is, in fact, a psychopath. And those who shake his hand at any summit are legitimizing him and trying to whitewash the image of this man-eater. To those who say that Putin is defending some kind of Russian interests by attacking Ukraine, let me just remind you that Putin came to power. He came to power on the blood of his own citizens. This message is especially directed at the Western audience. Watch the film on YouTube. There is a film called FSB Blows Up Russia. Now subtitles are available in the necessary language. Just watch this film. By the way, it was partly for information from this film that Alexander Litvinenko was poisoned with polonium. This is the story of how Putin and the FSB simply blew up apartment buildings in Russia, entire buildings, high-rises, in order to start the Chechen war and blame it all on so-called Chechen militants. But at one point something went wrong with these bombings and suddenly it was revealed that the FSB was behind them. In other words, there is evidence. At that time it was still possible to talk about this, to make programs about it. So watch it. Patrushev is involved in it as well. It will be extremely interesting. And on Putin's conscience are the deaths of Boris Nemtsov, Navalny, Anna Politkovskaya, and dozens of other opposition figures and journalists. In other words, there is so much blood on his hands that it's impossible to count. The plane with Prigozhin on board was blown up. And by the way, the plane of journalist Artem Borovik. Remember, that was in the year 2000, I believe. Artem Borovik and his editorial team were gathering information about Putin's childhood. That childhood is shrouded in darkness and secrecy. Putin carefully concealed who his parents were. Which date of birth is correct? No one understands. So basically, Artem Borovik and his editorial team were filming a program and spoke with Putin's biological mother. And 3 days before the broadcast of this program, the entire plane crashed. Everyone on board died, including the crew. And of course, Putin has the blood of thousands upon thousands of Ukrainian citizens on his hands, as well as his own people. In other words, this is a monster whom someone is for some reason trying to humanize. How can anyone even admire him or be proud of having a good relationship with him? Shaking his hand, calling him on the phone, chatting away, how is that even possible? If anyone thinks that Putin will change or repent after this war, I have bad news for you. So, if you just imagine, this will be very clear for our American friends. If back in the day, Henry Ridgway, the Green River Killer, Andrei Chikatilo, Jeffrey Dahmer, the Milwaukee Cannibal, if they had been caught after a certain number of victims and then released. Moreover, they were told that they would no longer face prison. So what do you think? Would they have continued their bloody path? especially if they were given guarantees of safety. Russia, after all, is now demanding some kind of security guarantees. So, what do you think? If these maniacs were guaranteed that nothing would happen to them, would they have continued their bloody path? I'm telling you, 200% yes. So what they're trying to do for Putin now, giving him what he stole, Ukrainian territories, and even writing up some kind of security guarantees, this is basically giving a carte blanche to a maniac. So the category of people who write things like, well, Putin is right, he just wanted Ukraine not to join NATO. And why does Putin get to decide where Ukraine, an independent sovereign state, should join? A simple example. Tomorrow Putin decides that American bases shouldn't be in Europe. Yes, he already decided that something shouldn't be on Ukrainian territory, or on the contrary, that something should be there. So he decides he doesn't want American bases to be there, especially anywhere close to Russia. Does he have the right to start killing American citizens if no one removes the American bases? What do you think? Or to bomb the European country where the American bases are located? Does he have that right? Let me remind you that Putin started a war with Ukraine, a country that doesn't have any American bases on its territory. Ukraine is not a member of NATO. What worried Putin was the very prospect of Ukraine joining NATO. And he officially, with his own mouth, named this as one of the reasons for the war. That in the future, the reason for the war is that in the future, Ukraine might someday join NATO. By the way, Putin also made a number of statements after that parade in Beijing. He noticeably started constantly clearing his throat in a way that's already kind of inappropriate. But let's hope that's a good sign. So anyway, Putin stated that territorial issues in Ukraine could be resolved through a referendum, but for that, martial law needs to be lifted. Look at him, he doesn't even run his own country like this, but he's giving us advice. Putin also claimed that in 2022, Russia offered Ukraine to withdraw troops from Donbass and end the war. But after the withdrawal of troops from Kyiv, Ukraine changed its mind. Putin said, "This is just incredible. Donbass is Ukrainian territory. Putin was offering us to withdraw troops from our own territory so that he could take it without a fight." And does anyone even understand, with all these questions, demands, and pseudo-referendums, why does the Organization of Concerned Nations even exist right now? Why does the UN even exist? If, back in the day, the Soviet Union was expelled from the League of Nations after attacking Finland, then now for its war against Ukraine, no one can even expel Russia from the UN. Well, let's imagine another situation. What if Germany hadn't left the League of Nations? At the time, Hitler left on his own because they demanded arms control, and he didn't want that. He knew he was going to start a war. So let's say Hitler didn't leave the League of Nations, occupied and annexed the Sudetenland, and invaded Poland. And the representative of Nazi Germany, standing at the podium in all his crosses and swastikas, would be telling everyone that Poland provoked them themselves. He would be talking about some kind of combat mosquitoes, saying that they were being prepared in Poland to, destroy the Aryan nation. And he would be doing this at the very moment when Wehrmacht troops were burning European cities, while representatives of other countries sat and listened attentively to all of it, just as they now listen to Russia's representative Nebenzia at the UN Security Council. In general, Putin also stated that if common sense prevails, then an agreement can be reached now. If not, everything will have to be resolved by military means. He's openly laughing right in Donald Trump's face. And against all this, Donald Trump is making statements like, "My relationships with Putin, Xi Jinping, and Kim Jong-un are very good. In a few weeks it will become clear just how good." What? Another statement from Donald Trump. "I have no statements for Putin. He knows my position. He has to make a decision. I will either be satisfied or not. If not, there will be consequences." So look, there's this court strategist for Putin, Karaganov. At one time, he proposed a gradual escalation strategy. Supposedly, the West needs to be made to understand that if they don't do something, Russia will do this. In other words, to lay out each step explicitly. If we do this, then we deploy new, say, warheads or something else. So why does Donald Trump, every time he extends this deadline, why not make things worse for Putin each time? Right. So a 10-day ultimatum, get 25% tariffs for India. They got it, that happened. A 50-day ultimatum, get 100% tariffs. Putin refuses to agree to a ceasefire, get 500%. Still refuses. Ukraine gets 5,000 missiles very quickly, and with the right coordinates. No, I'll give him time, give him time, give him time. At the same time, Donald Trump himself says 1,000 people die every day. But I'll give it some more time, let a few more die. And also, Donald Trump stated that Putin and Zelensky are not yet ready for peace talks. But soon, Trump says, something will happen. Listen, well, something is definitely going to happen soon. The sun will set, I don't know, September will end. Something will happen soon. Now, that's actually true. Have you noticed what has happened over the past not quite full year? Suddenly, in this war where Russia attacked Ukraine, there are two sides to blame. Well, according to some people, that is, the one to blame is not the aggressor who attacked. But suddenly, they decided to split the responsibility between Ukraine and Russia. So do you see how they've shifted the focus? When Donald Trump says UK, Ukraine, and Russia need a little more time to fight, like in a hockey match, he is consciously or unconsciously shifting the focus. It's not that they need to fight. It's not like some random fight just broke out here. It's not as if no one knows who started it. In this case, if we call things by their proper names, we should say that it's not about giving them time to fight like in a hockey match, but about giving the maniac more time to torment the person he attacked. More precisely, to give the aggressor time to try to torment even more. That's when everything falls into place. This is not a hockey arena. It's not a boxing ring where fighters mutually agree to a fight. We didn't want to fight. Ukraine never wanted to fight anyone. Ukraine is a peaceful country. It was Putin who wanted war, and it was Putin who attacked. This must be remembered. And that's exactly when the maniac started having problems. The one he attacked suddenly decided to fight back, and to fight back hard. And now the maniac wants everyone around to help him keep what he stole, to calm down the one he attacked. Why is he fighting back against me? Do you understand? By the way, the day before, Trump wrote a post on his social network reminding the Chinese leader not to forget the contribution of the United States to the victory in World War II. He also wrote that he knows Russia, North Korea, and China want to plot against the United States. And yet he says, I have excellent, good, wonderful relationships. By the way, this is an example of how a maniac is legalized, how he is humanized. The Russian national team is preparing to participate in the 2028 Olympics in full, according to the Russian Minister of Sports. And these games will take place from July 14th to 30th, 2028 in Los Angeles. Let me remind you, Russians were suspended from the Olympics in 2018. Since then, Russian athletes have competed under a neutral status, but in Paris, only 12 Russians received invitations. I wouldn't send even those anywhere. Well, what is this? And for us, yes. For us, of course, sport is outside of politics. But in reality, sport is very much about politics. I mean, any event that's broadcast to the whole world, to an audience of millions or even billions, where countries' flags are ranked, where sporting achievements are also used for political purposes. Take Hitler, for example. He was far from a fool when he organized one of the most grandiose Olympics in Berlin. In other words, he arranged everything there in such a way as to promote his own political ideas. He understood perfectly well that sport could be an excellent way to advance his political agenda. Just look at the symbol of that Berlin Olympics. An eagle clutching the Olympic rings in its talons with a swastika on its chest. There you have it. And that emblem was shown everywhere. So after that, the New York Times, I believe, wrote that Germany had returned to the fold of civilization after that Olympics. Well, you know what happened next. Let me put it this way. The sooner you lift sanctions from Russia, the sooner a new war will begin. That's an axiom. For one simple reason, you will show Putin that he will face no consequences for killing millions, that he will face no consequences for seizing other people's territories. Why should he then limit himself to just the war in Ukraine? Well, ask yourself that question. And how are we supposed to live if sanctions are lifted from him? And by the way, first and foremost, that's why Russia's neighbors are so active right now. Well, not only for that reason, and for which they deserve huge thanks. Because they understand that Putin will cross the border straight into their countries. That's all there is to it. By the way, it turns out Putin actually plans to live for a very long time. I don't know if you saw it or not, but a stray microphone caught a conversation between Putin and Xi Jinping at the parade. Well, the microphone was pointed at them, and this conversation, which they thought no one would hear, ended up online. Bloomberg reports, at least I first saw this information in Bloomberg. So the conversation went as follows. It was about the longevity of dictators. She says, in the past, people rarely lived to 70, but today, at 70, you're still a child. And Putin, thanks to the development of biotechnology, human organs can be transplanted continuously, and people will be able to live younger and even achieve immortality. That's what Putin says. She replies to him, the forecasts are that in this century there is a chance to live to 150 years old. So that's how they measured themselves. Forget 70 or 80 years old, at least 150. And let me remind you, Putin's eldest daughter, Maria Vorontsova, is considered Putin's advisor on genetic engineering issues, particularly the use of CRISPR technology. That is, it's a genome editing technology. There's a lot of talk about it. Some say that it's, well, unethical, but I think that for Putin doesn't care, ethical or not. So, this daughter of his is a co-founder and sits on the board of directors of the medical company Nomeco, and is also listed as a curator of state programs in the fields of medicine, genetics, and artificial intelligence. And she oversees a major genetics project supported by Rosneft, worth about 1 billion. So Putin is concerned with how to live at least as long again. He recently said that he's bored, he wants some action. You remember that, right? By the way, after this parade, don't you get the feeling that the world-class army Xi Jinping was talking about is actually the army of China, Russia, and North Korea? And that when China needs it, both the Russian and North Korean armies will go fight wherever they're told to. The dependence of these countries on China is such that it's not even vassal-like. It's something even harsher. I don't even know what to call it. Anyway, that's the feeling I have. But those whom Putin attacked have no intention of surrendering. Let me remind you, we have an important fundraiser for the separate Bohdan Khmelnytsky brigade. Right now on the Pokrovsk front, they are not only holding back the enemy with truly titanic efforts, but also destroying them. Recently I told you that they are even liberating some settlements in the Donetsk direction. You know, every time I later get information from those we've helped together, well, I have some ongoing contacts. I realize that I probably want to triple my efforts to support our armed forces. Like when they write to me, Boria, listen, the electronic warfare system worked for a month and then burned out. But during that month, it saved the lives of his comrades dozens of times, the very people I keep in touch with. Or they write, look, the drones on fiber optics destroyed this many enemy vehicles. Just yesterday, for example, I was talking to Vova. Remember, we helped them raise funds for sets of tires for the pickup trucks, for our drone operators. And he told me that back then it was just absolutely essential. They didn't know where or how to get it quickly, and that's when we helped them out. And there are dozens and dozens of such cases. And then there are the vampires who do their job, the mall ground evacuators. By the way, there will be a video about them soon. All of this saves the lives of good, bright, and strong people. That's why I'm asking you to please support the ongoing fundraising efforts, which also unfortunately shortens the lives of the inhumans who have come to our land.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Okay. By the way, my dear friends, these truly good, incredibly bright, and remarkably strong people who have dedicated themselves to a noble cause have bestowed upon us what I genuinely consider to be an absolutely priceless and profoundly meaningful gift, something truly special that I am eager to share with you right now. It is, in fact, a genuine Guar flag, bearing the authentic and highly significant autograph of none other than the esteemed Kyrilo Budanov himself, a signature that adds immense value and historical importance to this remarkable item. And they gave it to us for the good deeds that we are doing together. And so friends, the link to the fundraiser is in the description of this video. Let's help our warriors. There's PayPal for those who want to help from abroad. There's Mono, there's private, but if you're watching not on my channel, here's a QR code. It leads directly to the fundraiser. You know, every time I don't know, it's some incredible feeling. And they, our defenders, they rejoice like children too. Recently, a commander showed me a video of how they took apart that Russian convoy. And he was like a kid. Look, did you see that? That's awesome. There, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you could really see it in him. So, more joy for them. We will keep helping. Right now, they need our help more than ever. There's a piece of news I saw and, I just couldn't ignore it. Now, I don't know if it'll resonate or not. The mayor of Kazan said that C students are the main personnel reserve for the Russian government. Poor academic performance in Russia is no longer a problem, declared the mayor of Kazan during his speech on September 1st. And according to him, C students grow up to become future officials, regional heads, and mayors. From the stage, he addressed his grandson, encouraged him not to be afraid of getting C's, and reminded everyone that he himself used to get C's in school. But look, here's why, in principle, this news stirred up so much in me. He's right about something. In general, the system where a child was immediately written off and branded as a C student, I experienced that system myself. Maybe things are different in schools now. I think they're definitely different now. So, write in the comments if you have kids in school. How is it there now? Of course, the grading system is different too. I remember a time when teachers would freely use terms like C student or D student as if it was completely normal. There were also classes, in schools, usually named after the last letter. Like if A was the elite class, at least that's how it was for us, then B, V, and so on. We even had a class E, where they sent those who weren't keeping up academically. Even students who had to repeat a year were there. I remember how the teachers, without even trying to hide it, would stand around during breaks, talking loudly in their teacher voices, just chatting. And one of them says, "I have a lesson now with those idiots from class E." I remember thinking, wow. So every time I have this question about Russian teachers. They are the ones who are given one of the key roles in indoctrinating children with propaganda. All these important conversations, the heroes' desks where especially distinguished children are seated. I mean, they can't not understand that killing people in another country is wrong, it's unacceptable, it's outrageous. Actually, that's not quite right. They might be able to understand it, well, maybe not all of them, but their job is to normalize this war and these killings in the minds of children, to shape the perception that this is normal, that you are doing it for your homeland, for sacrifice and all the rest, in other words, to program the child with Putin's propaganda. I'm curious, how many teachers in Russia have left their jobs simply because they couldn't do this? Does anyone know of such cases? And when I watched some of those school assemblies, all my questions disappeared. There, the teachers are the first to march in front of the children, wearing some kind of pilot caps, and those St. George ribbons, those Colorado ribbons, almost carrying portraits of Putin. So basically it's all classic, the Soviet Union in its worst reproduction. Soon, those who remember the horrors of the Soviet Union will start thinking, my God, that was just child's play compared to Putin's Russia. Another interesting point. I decided to look into the difference between teachers' salaries, the pay for educators, and the pay for those who go to kill Ukrainians. Those contract soldiers are paid 30 times more than, say, a teacher's salary in St. Petersburg. 30 times more. You'd think it should be the other way around. Teachers, children, a bright future, upbringing. But no, this is Russia. In other words, if Putin wanted to, Russian teachers would have had decent salaries long ago. But no. A teacher is supposed to feel poor and humiliated, supposed to be afraid of losing their job, and then they'll do whatever they're told. In other words, that's the best kind of propaganda soldier, including indoctrinating children with this Putin propaganda. And Putin has to raise the payments for those who go to war almost every month, because no one has wanted to defend the motherland for free for a very long time. But even for big money, not everyone wants to anymore. And for Russia, 3 million is a lot of money. And just imagine, 3 million for a contract and 5 million if you die, that's a jackpot, for the family to get. But that's nothing. Those amounts are nothing compared to what Russian generals are making. Some are so lucky that literally right after the war, after the start of the full-scale invasion, they become billionaires. Today I'm reading a remarkable story. This is Russia in a nutshell, about General Tonkik. His last name is Tonkik, but in reality, he probably doesn't look it at all. He's the one responsible for those massive losses of the 58th Army in the Donetsk direction. So it turns out this general is directly interested in making sure the losses are absolutely monstrous. Why, you might ask? Because Well, first of all, there are all sorts of extortions in the army. If you want to transfer, if you don't want to be at the front line, if you don't want to be somewhere, everywhere, you have to pay for everything. All these streams of money flow to people like General Tonkik, but the primary source of business, if you can call it that, is the schemes involving dead souls. And here, General Tonkik, the lieutenant general, hit the jackpot. So the more of these occupiers die in these meat grinder assaults, the murkier the waters become, making it easier to get money for these dead souls. That is to say, payments for those unfortunate individuals who tragically died ingloriously there. And the more significant losses there are, the more substantial money there is, accordingly, for their families. If some family in Russia suddenly didn't receive money for an occupier who was eliminated on the Donetsk front, know that those payments were collected by that very General Tonkik using fake identities. What a brilliant business. Brilliant. So when Russian families are told, well, there's no body, it wasn't found. I actually told you before that there's an unspoken order not to retrieve the bodies. Later, of course, someone will get payments for those bodies, but not the Russian family that's waiting for the white car or those millions. But look how clever he is. So he became a billionaire in early 2023. See what a clever guy he is. They have a whole family business going on there. After all, you have to legalize that money somehow, all that huge amount of money. Just imagine how many of them are dying there, 5 million for each one, and so on. That's why the general's sister suddenly gets a loan, listen to this, for 23 billion. How many people in Russia can get a loan like that? Well, I think you already know the answer. Then they run some kind of business activity and legalize the money they get from those so-called dead souls, from extortion. So Russian billionaire generals are making quite a profit off cannon fodder. So, as they say, yes, he got his spot. Well, up there they see everything. So, Lieutenant General Evgeny Tonkik, if divine retribution doesn't catch up with you, other good and decent people will. I think that if you dig around, you'll find that this general owns a ton of real estate in the hated West. For some reason, they love to buy property where their enemies and the values they despise are. But unfortunately, as long as Russian oil and gas are being bought, they'll keep getting money. But today I came across an interesting piece of news. Russia only has a little more than 20 years' worth of oil reserves left. So it's not just like that. There are only 25 years of profitable proven oil reserves left in Russia at the current production rate, said Oleg Kazanov, head of Rosnedra, at a meeting of the State Council Commission on Energy. An official has told you 25 years and that's it. The reserves, that's if no new ones are discovered, because practically all known deposits, 96%, have already been put into production by the subsoil fund, Kazanov stated. And let me remind you, right now they're selling at a price much lower than they would have if they hadn't started the war. So attempts to find new large oil deposits in Russia are not yielding any results. Last year, 39 fields were discovered, but their total reserves amounted to only 21 million tons. That's just ridiculous. This is according to oil and gas expert Mikhail Krutikin. That is, at the current rate of extraction, Russians are now producing 520 million tons per year. They pump out the same volume as from all these newly discovered fields in about 2 weeks. So there's some news for fans of Russian oil. And who are the fans of Russian oil? That's right, Orban and Fico. They won't like this news. By the way, they've pulled off some new cringe over there. At this point, you could even call them something like Cringeslav Orban, for example. So Hungary and Slovakia demanded that the European Union lift sanctions. Guess from whom? From 6 Russian oligarchs, Mazepin, Aven, Bajev, Avdolyan. And as for Slovakia, Alisher Usmanov and Mikhail Friedman. So basically, they split up the list of oligarchs. You asked to lift sanctions from these, I'll ask for those. Honestly, it's just amazing. All right, fine. And then other members of the European Union offered them an alternative. Well, we could lift sanctions from 1 or 2 if there might be weak evidence against them. Maybe the case wouldn't hold up in court. And so on. But Orban and Fico said, no, lift sanctions from all of them. It's just incredible. I can understand when they try to justify it with some kind of energy independence, some sort of energy security, when they're trying to defend their purchase of oil and gas, that I can at least understand their interest in. But here, they're just blatantly trying to get sanctions lifted from 6 Russian oligarchs. Let me emphasize, Russian. And both Hungary and Slovakia, where citizens are among the poorest in the European Union, are even being offered alternatives, but they still say no. Are you all kidding over there or what? Let's put it this way. What do you do with someone in a company who sabotages the work of the entire company? So the whole company is working, and then at the end, this person comes along and wipes out everyone's work and says, all right, I won't delete your month's worth of work, but only if you give me a raise. So what do you do with people like that? That's right, you fire them. Why has the European Union only just started considering an alternative voting mechanism? And even then, they've only just started to consider it. If someone asks me what era the war in Ukraine took place in, I'll say it was the era of the most patient and toothless politicians, when the whole world, the civilized world, will finally realize that goodness needs to have fists, or better yet, brass knuckles. Once they understand that, then, as if by magic, most wars will disappear, and all the dictators will crawl into their bunkers and sit there quietly. So friends, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, subscribe to this channel, and let's help raise funds for our soldiers. I'm really asking you to do this. They protect us, and we will help them. Wishing us all a peaceful day, and of course, glory to Ukraine.